Now, Washington Mornings on the Mall. And AM 630.
6:07 on WMAL, where Washington comes to talk. It's Brian Wilson, joined today by Larry O'Connor from Breitbart. And joining us on the line is Dr. Peter Morici from the University of Maryland. All-round good guy, helped me understand that number stuff that I struggle with so much. Okay, so here's my first question, because it's all about me. What happened to my 401k yesterday? I felt like I got run over by a Mack truck.
Well, the global economy has gotten to the point where American companies can't increase their sales anymore. And so the only way they're going to be able to increase their profits, and they will manage to increase their profits with flat sales, is to cut the number of jobs. And you know what that means. It puts you into a downward spiral. So each individually, by cutting their payrolls over the next 6 months, could easily thrust the economy into a recession. You saw recession fears yesterday.
So, Peter Morici, this shouldn't be interpreted as some sort of Wall Street or business reaction to the debate the night before?
Well, I don't think so. The debate was not a draw. You know, it's tough for Mr. Romney to win a debate like that. You know, he really had his chance to nail the president on Libya in the previous debate and didn't. So what he got out of the last debate was looking presidential and keeping things as they were.
All right, but back to the drop. It's 243 points. I understand biggest one-day drop since last June. Is this earnings season just going to be sort of weak?
Yeah, it's going to be weak, but especially the sales numbers. You know, one of the things to remember is that the stock market looks at sales numbers as well as earnings because they're an indicator of where earnings are going. If you can't sell product, it's kind of hard to keep boosting profits. And that's because the economy's in a funk. I mean, I cannot express to you just how lousy growth below 2% coming out of a recession, as such as the kind we just did, is. I mean, it is a terrible performance. At this point, Mr. Reagan's recovery was growing at 6.3%.
Yeah.
Mr. Obama's 2.2%, and that's because of a couple of good early quarters.
Okay, but here's my problem: is if it's true that the businesses are struggling and that sales are soft, and that they're worried about the future, why is it that all of a sudden it seems that every official number we get from the federal government looks sort of positive?
Well, I mean, it's kind of like a dead cat bounce. I mean, they're positive only because they've come off a very bad fall.
Right.
And that's really what it is. There's nothing out there that says we're going to get the kind of growth we need. In fact, the first quarter of next year is likely to be quite poor, simply because there'll probably be some staggering and resolving the fiscal cliff.
Well, you know, the Governor Romney's been making some pretty good inroads in attacking President Obama for not having a plan or a vision for his next 4 years. So lo and behold, yesterday the president came out with his plan, and he calls it the new economic patriotism. So what is in this plan? And also, if you're against it, does that mean you're unpatriotic?
Well, that's the implication, and it's foolish. I mean, it isn't like he's saying, let's all sacrifice a bit so we can all do a lot better, but rather, it's Tim Geithner's the new normal. Mr. Short Pants has convinced America that it has just emerged from the deepest
Mr.
hole.
Short Pants? Peter
Yeah, that's
Morici?
Mr. Geithner, Mr. Short Pants. Yeah. I mean, what we really needed is an adult over a treasury. In any case, they've convinced the country that this is the worst hole and the worst problem since Moses in the desert, or certainly Roosevelt. And in reality, Reagan had a deeper hole. Double-digit inflation, double-digit unemployment, an economy jolted by tripling of energy prices, and unemployment for Reagan peaked at 10.8%, for Mr. Obama only 10%. And the second thing is that somehow or other, the last 30 years was a nightmare of instability and an absence of assured growth, when in reality, most economists view the last 30 years prior to the crisis as the Great Moderation, in which things had never been better. And, you know, they've convinced the country that this is what we should expect. Settle for 2% growth. Romney's a menace. No, the real menace is the new patriotism, which defines America in terms of abandoning its principal competitive strength, and that's the entrepreneurial instincts of the private sector.
Well, and the long title of this Obama plan is the new economic patriotism, a plan for jobs and middle-class security. Where's the jobs plan in simply raising taxes on the wealthy? I don't see how that translates to jobs.
There ain't. I mean, if this stuff worked, why after 4 years aren't things better? That's enough time. He doesn't need any more time. Ronald Reagan got the unemployment rate from 10.8 to 7.3% in a period of less than 2 years. Mr. Obama just hasn't done that. And for Reagan, the number of adults participating in the labor force was increasing. If the same number of adults were participating in the labor force today as when the recovery began, the unemployment rate would be 9.7%. 90% of the reduction in unemployment, I hate to sound so wonky, but this is important, 90% of the reduction in unemployment has been from adults, mostly older adults, but under 65, people 50 to 65, giving up, looking for work, and young people in their 20s borrowing yet more money to take more useless graduate programs at places that I won't mention. You know, getting master's degrees in advanced humanities studies. You know, learning how to
underwater basket weaving.
Right. Well, the thing is, you know, they've been told that America is a failure. They go out into America and say, "Geez, it is failed. So how do I avoid dealing with this?" Well, borrow some more money.
Well, I guess to me the greater question is, why is it that we have to wait until 13 or 14 days before we make the most important decision that Americans are going to make about the future of this country and the direction that it heads? Why is it that we have to wait until that period in the campaign to find out what it is that the president plans to do if reelected?
Well, no, we have heard all along. Right from the very beginning, he's talked about his 5-point plan, which is bogus. I mean, let's take, more math and science teachers. We don't need more math and science teachers. Children are already required to take a great deal of math and science, but they're also convinced by people like Mr. Obama it's not very important. Have you ever seen him go to a high school and say, you know, I want each of you to consider becoming an engineer? Our engineering schools are filled with Chinese students because Americans don't study engineering because children, unlike when I was a kid, and we were encouraged to take up the sciences, are instead encouraged to be social activists and get out there and participate in some charity, which is a good thing. But you have to earn some money before you can give some away. How about doubling exports? Trade agreements will only help you if you double exports without doubling imports. But Woodfool, sitting on the other side of the table, is going to let us double our exports without insisting that they double their sales here. Create 1 million manufacturing jobs? That's a goal, not a policy. The fact is he's not creating manufacturing jobs at a reasonable clip because he doesn't do business with China. An 11% appreciation in China's currency, that would be like if gasoline was, $2 a gallon. All right, and there was shortages and raising it a dime. I mean, Mr. Obama doesn't have a sense of the scope of the problem, a clear idea of what it takes to solve the problem, and instead he's just falling back on rehashed food co-op generalizations, which Mr. Shortpants gladly provides. My course used to be offered in Mr. Shortpants' graduate program over at Johns Hopkins SAIS, and I can tell you those guys are good at folding handkerchiefs, okay? And no, they get a good education in foreign affairs. But economics, Mr. Shortpants is not a banker and not an economist. He should be over at Health and Human Services, putting up public housing and saying, here, let's give it away.
Oh, Peter, why don't you tell us what you really think about the situation?
Well, with 2 weeks to go, I'm very concerned about my children's future because, frankly, this guy is just, eating the seed corn.
Quickly, you have 10 seconds. Who should be, instead of Mr. Shortpants, who should be the new Treasury Secretary under Romney?
Well, I think I'm a little frightened by that because right now his principal advisor is the dean at Yale, the dean at Columbia, and he's really a Bush administration retread, and he does pose the possibility of more Bush administration policies, which indeed did fail. He needs to go to a state university.
You never get a 10-second
answer. League.
You never get a 10-second answer from Maurice.
What was I thinking?
Can't be done. Well, I didn't have a single person to give you, other than myself, of course.
There we go.
There we go. Peter Maurice for Treasury Secretary.
Obama can be a shameless self-promoter. Why can't I? Equal opportunity for all Americans.
All right, Peter Maurice, thank you very much for joining us here.